I can remember, I had to take a job away from one of the groomsmen in my own wedding.
Wow.
That was
Ouch.
brutal.
Ouch.
That was brutal. At one point, we had $16 in the bank. We had $300,000 in payables, and most of which were on sort of credit cards that we had taken out. Like, we were in dire straits.
Good Monday morning. Have you ever wondered how successful and happy people got their starts? Every success story begins somewhere, often more humbly than you'd expect. I'm Leilani Brown, host of Your First Job, the podcast.
Good Monday morning, and thank you for tuning in to Your First Job, the podcast. I have a real treat today. I'm talking with Adam Lowry, who is the president of the Lowry Climate Group. But before that, he had a number of different executive roles and senior roles and founder roles, not the least of which are founding a brand that we all know and love, Method. So really excited to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Leilani. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm not sure that I got Lowry Climate Group right, but if I were to meet you today, as I am now, describe for me what it is that you do and how will our listeners understand your impact through Lowry Climate Group?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do with the Lowry Climate Group is to help businesses that create positive climate impact perform really well. It's a consultancy business. I work on a project basis or on an advisory basis, and I work for all kinds of different types of companies across lots of different sectors. The common thread is that they're operating their business in a way explicitly to try to create a climate impact or climate benefit.
Great. And you are not new to this, but true to it. You've been studying it for a long time. I did our research on you, and you studied climate change at Stanford, probably at the beginning when we were starting to provide some practical discipline around environmental science.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that this was going to be your path, and sort of how do you practically apply environmental science and impact to your work, or was it just something that you were interested in?
Yeah, at school, I was studying chemical engineering. That was my major and what I have my degree in. The funny thing about it was I was about 2.5 years into that degree and realized that I actually didn't really love the engineering part of chemical engineering. And I was doing some coursework in ecology and in environmental science. And that's what was igniting my passion. Now, it was not an option to change horses in midstream. So I went ahead and completed that degree in chemical engineering. But by the time I graduated, I knew I had learned by that point a lot about the interconnectivity of ecosystems and, importantly, about some of the issues of what we now call climate change, global warming, and knew that was the direction that I wanted to go with my career. So instead of going into the fields that a lot of my classmates in chemical engineering were going into, I started just asking around and happened to find a professor or get in touch with a professor that taught a course that I really liked, and managed to weasel my way into my first job, which was at the Carnegie Institute for Science, working on climate change.
So chemical engineering, climate, environmental impact, commercial viability, all combined. What did you do at Carnegie? That sounds like such an interesting, but also unique, opportunistic, approach to a first job.
Yeah, and it's a first job, right? So I was doing whatever it was that they wanted me to do, and I'll get to that. But first, a bit on Carnegie. So the Carnegie Institute for Science has several divisions. One of them is called the Department of Global Ecology, and the head, at least at the time of that, and I think actually still today, was a guy named Dr. Chris Field, and he was one of the lead authors of Working Group 2 of the UN's climate reports, let's say. And so this was a hard science organization. It was meant to study what would happen as we put more CO2 in the atmosphere and try to predict what would happen, and then more importantly, what we should do about it, which I'll come to in a second. My role specifically there was, so I managed a big computer model, a climate model, that modeled the biosphere. So that's the biological part of the planet, not the atmosphere, not the ocean, but the other stuff. And my role was essentially to make it better and better over time. So using the science that was coming out of that field and then programming it into the, into the model itself. And then using that model to run analyses that the people above me on the food chain would use to do scientific research and publish papers.
I would imagine that even at that time, as the field is sort of mushrooming, it was hard to keep pace with what you were learning, what we were collectively learning about the impact of our own consumer behavior and modern behaviors on the environment. How did it feel, if you can recall, to be in that space when you're looking at it and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to sound the alarm, or we need to sound the alarm?
This was in the late 90s, and it was really clear at that time what human activity was doing in terms of climate stability. And we were publishing papers about that. I worked on the Kyoto Protocol of 1997, big international effort to try to set emissions limits for different countries. And it's sort of wild now, 30 years later, to see how stunningly accurate that work was 30 years ago. And now we have 30 years of progress on our understanding of the climate system. I'm now not involved in the science part of it, but it's truly ridiculous to me that people would question the level of consensus and the quality of the science being done, and in particular the motivations of the scientists doing that science. But it's the model that I ran and helped improve upon predicted heavier storms in places and drier dries in places, greater wildfires. The things that we're seeing that are climate fueled were all things that
you predicted.
We said were going to happen in the 90s.
Are you encouraged by what you're seeing in terms of consumer reaction or people's reactions outside of the science and the politics of it even? Are you encouraged by our own self-motivated, self-directed behavior? And what encourages you in particular?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that question. So I'll take some pieces of it. I'm generally encouraged by the fact that climate impacts and climate action are things that are part of our everyday economic, political, business discussions. And that was not at all the case. I mean, the furthest thing almost 30 years ago. And so that's incredibly encouraging. I am also encouraged by the level of technological innovation that is now reality. The cheapest watt of energy you can install pretty much anywhere now is a renewable watt. I could rattle off a million stats, but putting it in the sort of red-blue frame, Texas is the greatest wind power producing state in the United States, right? There's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but
different than what we thought was possible.
There is irreversible momentum toward a cleaner and greener future from a climate and carbon standpoint. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and that gives me great hope.
Yeah.
But speed's really important here, and how quickly we do that, how quickly we decarbonize our economy, the way we make energy, et cetera, is going to determine the level of sort of pain that we and our children have to deal with later. So, the funny thing about dedicating your career to climate impact is that you're never going to be done. You are never going to solve the problem in your lifetime. And so, ends up being a whole sort of psychological game that you learn to play with yourself as you navigate through your career of highs and lows. And I certainly go through those in terms of periods of great optimism and periods of great pessimism. But you soldier on and keep working to try to solve this big problem because it's a really important problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think if it's a lifelong commitment, and I think, dare I say, a calling, the value of the history, it gives you perspective to know that you're not where you want to be, but you're not where you were, and that there's some progress. We have certainly within our listening demographic, people who are recent graduates, emerging or early career talent, but also some existing talent that are making values-based decisions about where they want to work. And I would say that environmental justice and climate action is part of that, ESG framework, if you will. And I wonder how a candidate might assess a company and their commitment and execution against climate action, because it's interviews are a two-way street. How do we ask the question about what their commitment is to environmental action?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, asking that question is step one. Number two is, to the extent that you can, if you can understand what that company or organization's impacts are to start with, that's really important. If they know what their impacts are, that's a good start. Then you can start to have a conversation about how are you addressing those impacts and what's your strategy, what's your plan. And usually I find that if you have that conversation, you can sort of sniff out what is we got a good plan and we're not doing much about it. And, the PR people have put it out there versus
the annual report.
This is a real depth of commitment and something that we're trying to do to, transform our business or work on a specific part of the climate universe. Human intuition is sort of amazing in that way. You can kind of ferret out a greenwasher pretty easily. But what I think is great actually now is that this is part of the conversation. I don't know anyone who's a recent college grad that doesn't want to align their work with their personal values, whether that's climate impact or something else. And the future belongs to them. So, I mean, another 30 years from now, we're going to be, I think, in a really amazing place.
Yeah.
And I hope that people that are mid-career like myself, can help try to pave the way so that happens better and bigger and faster than it would otherwise.
Yeah. I learned a new term, greenwasher.
Oh yeah. That one, a greenwasher. Yeah. That's not my term. That one's been out there for a while. Yeah.
Well, speaking of washing, dun.
Great segue. Yeah.
I can be really, really corny if you want me to. But speaking of washing and keeping things clean and a non-greenwashing company, but you were the founder and co-founder of Method Products. And when I learned that I would be speaking to you, I got so excited. I ran under my cabinet and I was like, we have this product, we have dishwashing.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, we are Method users. But that was a company that was, sort of from my own understanding, and I would love for you to unpack it, created out of both, your desire to have positive impact or less detrimental impact of the things that you were seeing. And it was also a disruptor in the entire cleaning products and the product category, multiple product categories. And you were taking on the giants at a time before they were committed to clean products. And I'm not even convinced that they are committed to clean products. But take me back to that moment when you decided that this is something that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, it's easy from this vantage point to say that it all connected at that point, but the origin story was a lot simpler than that. So after 4 years at working at Carnegie and working on the Kyoto Protocol, as I mentioned, I started to get very frustrated that the science was clear, but it wasn't leading to the policy change that it was supposed to lead to. And so I started thinking about, well, is there a way to use the business sector, to try to create positive impact? And I have a co-founder in Method, Eric Ryan, and he and I landed on this category, consumer category, just very simply because it was the ugliest and most toxic thing that we could find in the house, right? And the basic idea of Method was to try to mainstream a product that was healthier, didn't have the toxic chemicals that are often in cleaning products, made in a more, what we now say is more sustainable way, like a greener way. And equally as importantly, elevate this cleaning product from something that's ugly and toxic and hides under your sink to something that's beautiful and you want to leave out. And so we really just combine these two really simple ideas of great design and sustainability to build a brand that was really different. And then over time and through a lot of mistakes, we also defined our strategy to in a way that helped us compete against the incumbents in the space, which, as you mentioned, are very, very large, multinational, multi-billion dollar companies. And, what that's about in a headline is that, you can't play their game. You have to define a different game that you can kind of win. And that's what we really kind of focused on with that business.
Yeah. And you are no longer in the business. You've exited. How did you successfully exit? Because that's not always, that is some founder's dream, to be able to exit. But
yeah, do you ever really exit your
I don't know if you ever really exit.
But I don't work there anymore, if that's what you mean. Yeah, so the business sold for the first time in 2012, and it sold to the family office that owned our largest competitor in Europe. And they put the two businesses together, and we ran the two businesses together for another 3-4 years before I started my second business, Ripple Foods. And I was still a little bit involved with Method here and there. We built a LEED Platinum certified factory in Chicago, one of the coolest things I've ever done in my career, a bunch of really cool stuff after we got acquired. But in 2018, the business sold again, the combined business, to SC Johnson, which is a big consumer products manufacturer. And at that time, honestly, I thought that they'd want to hear from the founder a little bit and maybe, keep a relationship going. But I was wrong. They were really interested in that. So, I sort of faded away at that time. And that's when I no longer had any involvement with Method technically, although emotionally, I'm still very invested.
Of course. I'd imagine that's hard when you are emotionally attached, and then people buy or acquire businesses for a lot of reasons, not the least of which to put them out of business or to remove a competitor. But this sounded like a very mission-driven, impact focused business before its time, before the other. So it's definitely disheartening when it doesn't live on in the same way. Is there anything that you would do differently?
No, and I mean, I would say I'm immensely proud that Method is a much bigger and even more mainstream brand today than it was, when it sold in 2012 and when it was acquired in 2018. In both cases, the business was grown to be or acquired to be grown. Yeah. And one of the things I'm really proud of is after it sold in 2012, usually a lot of times this is the time where people expect a mission-driven business to jettison its mission and pursue,
Profit.
cold, strategy of growth. And actually, the opposite was true. We got even better and deeper on our sustainability mission after we sold the business in 2012. I mentioned the factory we built in Chicago. That was combined with going from outsourced manufacturing to manufacturing ourselves, renewably powered, amazing social impact with that facility in Chicago. And we actually could measure that. So without going into depth, there is an organization called B Lab that runs a certification called the B Corp certification. And our scores on how well we were doing on our sustainability just sort of went through the roof after we got acquired. Now, I don't know much about that stuff after S.C. Johnson acquired the business because I was no longer involved. But I do know that factory in Chicago is still humming along, still providing jobs, still operating using renewable power, and actually has a lot more product moving through it these days. So, that at least makes me feel really good.
It should. A lot of the people that will listen to this are aspiring founders, but have a day job. They are side hustlers. They're sort of participating in the gig economy and looking for that side business to catch up with the main business or the main income stream. What advice would you have or might you have for them? You came at it differently. And I will say too, I know that you are the son of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
That's also very different. So what advice would you have for folks that are doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's cliche, but keep plugging away, right? Method was a 18-year overnight success. So it does take time. There were some very, very dark times, a lot of for the business near-death experiences. Yeah. And so you just, if it's something that gives you passion and energy, you just got to keep plugging away at it. And eventually, hopefully, the thing starts to take off.
Yeah.
The good news now, I would say, relative to when I started Method back, it was the year 2000, is the resources available for entrepreneurs, both financial and otherwise, to help get a business off the ground are orders of magnitude greater than they were 25 years ago. And so the real risks, and this is, I think, is the important point. The real risks of entrepreneurship are way lower than they were 25 years ago. And I should mention, they're still way lower here in the United States than they are in any other country in the world.
Wow.
You can start a business. If it's a good idea with a solid plan and you're working hard, you can often raise capital to fund the development of that business. Mm-hmm. And if the worst happens and you fall flat on your face and it goes belly up, here in this country, you can go tell your next employer about the business you started, what you did, why it didn't work, and they're going to think that that's great experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, in other times, and certainly in other countries in this world, like if you do that, you got a black mark on your resume. A failed business in the United States is like a positive on your resume.
A resume builder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a good point. But I'll ask you this, because there will be people who are interviewing or going back to corporate or looking for their transition after they have been laid off or they're experiencing some kind of job loss. You obviously look for, I would imagine, you reward calculated risk takers who try stuff.
We have to,
get stuff done and try stuff. What other things do you look for when you're looking to hire new talent in your organization?
There's a whole sort of story with the evolution of that with the Method business. My co-founder and I actually wrote a book about it because it wasn't so much about our genius. It was us sort of trying to answer that question for ourselves over time. And ultimately, Method kind of had a quirky sort of culture, and we had some values that really we kind of mined from within the business as we kind of outgrew ourselves and started to see, cracks in the dam. And we had some values, like one of our values was, what would MacGyver do? And now, perhaps some younger listeners are not going to remember or know who MacGyver is, but
Yes.
A lot of us will.
It's become like a little reference. Keep going, but I'll tell you.
Yeah. But, it was really what that was about was resourcefulness, right? And how can you get resourceful to solve a problem? Because, we're a startup. You can't throw money at the problem because we don't have it.
Right.
Right. And another example was we had one of our other values was keep Method weird, which is a play on keep Austin weird, that old campaign, right? And that was really about, it was kind of a quirky place. It was, what are you going to bring and contribute to the culture of this place? Yeah. Because ultimately what we figured out with Method is that our ability to innovate was how we played a game that our competitors couldn't. So they won with scale and marketing dollars. So we went after product experience through innovation. And ultimately, innovation is a game of how do you bring diverse perspectives together and create something that is new, that other people haven't seen before. And so culture is really, really important to that. So is resourcefulness, problem solving. And so we built, at that business, we built the culture around that. And to get to your question, we ultimately structured our hiring and our interviewing processes in a way that would try to bring out, how resourceful was this person and how unique and willing were they to add to a culture, not just sort of take away from it.
Yeah. You're very generous. So the method, the book that you're talking about, the method, 7 obsessions that helped our scrappy startup turn an industry upside down. First of all, great title.
Oh, thank you.
And, but you're generous. And the reason why I say you're generous is that there's an instinct, perhaps, not to share as much of the secret sauce to how to do it. But I think this is generous because you're literally sharing the secrets. That is no secret, right? And there's a stick-to-itness, and there's a grind, and there's a surrounding yourself with the right people. How did you get to that point of generosity, or where you realized that you would grow by giving away some trade secrets, if you will, or some scale secrets? What got you to that point?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I'm not sure I have a good answer for. I think part of it was I was 25 when we started Method, and you'd have to be, I don't know what, to think that you were going to be like the best CEO out there with no experience and 3 years out of school. And so really early on, Eric and we actually brought in the first CEO of Method. Neither of us was actually ever the CEO of Method. We had a couple. And we did senior roles within the business. But we needed help in a lot of areas that we just didn't have experience in. And from day one, we thought, well, we better find people that know how to do this rather than sort of pretending that we did. And the more you do that, the more you realize that it works. And it does, I guess, require putting yourself aside, or maybe some ambitions aside. It definitely requires being realistic about what you're good at and less good at. But my experience is it's kind of the only way, if you want to build a business that's really meaningful and impactful, which was the whole point with the Method business, you have to do it that way.
Yeah. No, I think that's it's very important. But you said you didn't know how, and there's a combination of maybe early naivete, also courage, and a focus on the next thing. You can't stay in one place. If you were,
I think a lot of it has to do with like, is your is your, motivation around the business and the thing you're trying to create? And if it is, then you need to take yourself out of the center of it when that's best for the business.
Yeah.
And some people don't do that. Some people, get a little blinded by their own ambition.
Yeah. Yeah. Were there times when you just wanted to give up, like where it just
Oh,
became untenably hard? Like, can you describe
oh,
how
sure.
you
I mean,
felt,
a million
why you
times.
stayed in it?
Yeah, I mean, a million times. But I guess the why you stayed in it, it was it wasn't dead yet. And so, at least you had to see it through to, if the business was going to die, you had to see it all the way through. But, I can remember, I had to take a job away from one of the groomsmen in my own wedding.
Wow.
That was
Ouch.
brutal.
Ouch.
That was brutal. At one point, we had $16 in the bank. We had $300,000 in payables, and most of which were on sort of credit cards that we had taken out. Like, we were in dire straits, and it was through force of will, luck, lucky breaks, just working hard that we managed to, like, each time kind of work through those and get the business to, like, the next point where it could keep going.
Yes.
And I mean, you mentioned the book. We described several in there
Of those instances. That has to have an impact on personal relationships and family dynamic and relationship too.
Yeah. Now, fortunately, I've been with my wife since well before Method. So we started dating in 1994. We didn't get married until 2005, but she's been with me every step of the way. So she's seen all of the highs and lows.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are a son of entrepreneurs. You yourself have been a serial entrepreneur and still going at it.
Yeah.
What do you tell the next generation or your kids? Do you say, do it or don't do it? Just get a job.
Well, listen, I think it's a thrilling ride. And I think I will say that, first of all, do it. Jump in with both feet. You'll never regret it. I will also say, from the vantage point of having done it several times now, that it's a lot easier the second, third, and fourth time around than it is the first time around. And it can be all consuming. And for me, was all consuming at a lot of times. And so it's important to, consider that as well in your overall life situation and what your goals and, what other people in your life are, can help you with and support you with. And so, for me, I think one of the luxuries I had a really good education. And I knew that if my business didn't work out, I had a good education to fall back on and go get another job. And that was the way that, in my own mind, I lowered the risk in my own mind to say, okay, I'm going to go and do this. And as I was mentioning before, now with all of the resources that are available, financial and otherwise, to entrepreneurs, I think that level of risk of going out there and really going for it is lower than it's ever been. And I think that's really fantastic, because that's what allows all of these amazing ideas and companies to thrive, all throughout the US. And it's the engine of our economy. I think it's fantastic. And so I guess I would say go for it and recognize that there's a lot more help there, and the downside is a lot less than you probably think it is.
Yeah.
So just jump in.
So we're recording this on the morning after the Super Bowl. And let's just say a month ago, you were given a 60-second spot on the Super Bowl for a commercial to go to a mass audience.
Oh, my
what
goodness.
are the 2 to 3? I know that's daunting, right? It's good real estate, though.
Yeah.
One or two things that you would want the viewing audience to know or do as it relates to climate action?
Oh, man.
I think there are tons of things that we can do, but
yeah,
I put you on the
voting, voting for climate. I mean, please incorporate that into your voting at all levels.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into a political discussion because there's a lot of, things going on. But at the end of the day, if we don't demand it, we're not going to get the sort of support from a public policy that we really do need in order to accelerate our action. And the thing, I guess,
environmental justice and saying voting is not a political statement, because there are a lot of things to vote for, from dog catcher to president.
Yeah.
So
and we need to demand this stuff if it's going to happen for us. It still just frustrates me to no end when political discourse or public discourse is sort of like, oh, climate change, or we could do what's best for the economy. That is like the worst false thing ever. Addressing climate change is the greatest job creation opportunity. It's the greatest economic prosperity opportunity that humanity has ever had, right? And, it's probably beyond the scope of this podcast to explore exactly why that is, but believe me, it's true. But yet, often our public discourse is sort of stuck in a narrative from decades ago. So the way you change that is get involved in public discourse, vote, and vote in a way that supports what you want to see.
That is the perfect way to punctuate this conversation. So thank you so much for being with us this morning and for sharing your thoughts and sharing your journey. I think it's going to be inspiring and also actionable as people look for their next opportunity.
So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Good Monday morning, everyone. Today is March 31st, the last day of the first quarter of 2025. And my goodness, what a quarter. It went fast. I wanted to offer something different today as we begin this new week and new quarter. Today, I'm releasing my 4th book, Your Next Giant Reset, a career comeback guide. Yes, another book, but this one is free. And let me tell you why. Right now, there's so much uncertainty in the world. There is frustration, anger, and even fear. I get it and I feel it. In the months ahead, I suspect that so many talented people, smart, seasoned, credentialed people just like you, may find themselves navigating an unexpected career transition and doing so for the very first time. And if that's you, if you're reeling from recent difficult news or trying to figure out how to manage a job search, personal responsibilities, and financial realities, the last thing you need is someone trying to sell you hope from behind a paywall. So for that reason, this book is my free gift to you. Here's what you'll find inside. Your Next Giant Reset walks you through my 4-phase approach: gathering yourself, emotional resilience and honest reflection, pre-launch, telling your story with clarity and confidence, go-to-market strategy, navigating today's hiring landscape with intention, and campaign momentum, sustaining energy when the process stretches on longer than you expected. Here's all I ask in return. Use your email to download the free ebook and then stay connected with us for upcoming career resources and special invitations. Share the book with a friend or anyone who needs it in your network. And third, engage with us. Tune in to the Giant Steps YouTube channel and follow me on LinkedIn for more career content. Career transitions happen all the time, but it doesn't have to define you. And I hope that this guide helps you take the next giant steps toward your future. Thank you for listening and be encouraged. Your First Job is a production of Giant Steps, LLC, a company working at the intersection of strategy, culture, career, and education. I'm Leilani Brown, CEO and host of the show. Many thanks to our executive producer, Sam Osborne, and Maxwell Brown for producing our show music and this episode. You can learn more about our company and the podcast by visiting giantstepsllc.com. Thank you for listening.